Good morning, afternoon and evening, my crazies. My name's Angela. I'm the Crazy Poppy Lady, and today I'm going to be showing you how to do the waistcoat stitch. Now this has actually got another couple of names that it also sometimes goes by. It is also called the knit stitch, as you can see, because as we do this and as we build this up, we get the little V's in it that resemble knitting, and so far for the yarn that I've used, this is the first time I've ever had one of these patterned yarns actually look like it could work. Still haven't got the Rosie's mind. Right, so let's just watch the intros and then we'll get on with explaining the stitch for you today. Right, little tip before we start, make sure you watch this video in full and listen along, okay, and that is prior to starting. Then just rewind and start, because I'm going to be throwing in some tips and tricks and how-tos and all the rest of it today. So just watch in until I say that's the end of the repeat, off you go. May not apply today because this was a little bit of a nightmare for me. To one, get the edges straight, two, sort my tension out, because it is a very it's a fun stitch to do once it's in your head and once you know what you're doing. Right, so let's start off with a tip number one, and I am working with a DK weight yarn. Now normally in every other block I have done, I use a 4mm hook, don't I? But for this stitch I would suggest that you go up at least one hook size. Now I'm on a 5mm, and for me that has given me the stitch that the way I want it to look, the size it needed to be, and the ease of it. If it is your hook is too tight, too small, sorry, or you're holding your yarn too tight, then I'm sorry to say this stitch is going to be an absolute nightmare for you, okay, because it's going to be worked too tightly. And this is one of these stitches where it needs to stay relaxed and loose. Don't panic though, it won't sag, it will still make a beautiful, as you can see here, a beautiful thick texture piece of fabric. There we go. Right, so grab your hook, grab your yarn, and let's get it going. Right, so for this block today, if you are following along with a stitch a week, you are going to need to chain loosely 22. If you're using it for another project, it is just a case of making your chain as long as you need and adding one at the end. There's no special number of stitches. Right, so let's get going. And as I said, stitch a week, gang. You need to be chaining 22. Now for this one, I'm only going to do a sample today. I'm only going to go small because I've already got my square, and I've realised it's a lot quicker doing it this way and a lot less editing. Right, so let's get chaining. Right, so I've chained 11 just to show you how to work it today. Right, so now we are going to work onto a row number one. So for that we are going to go into the second chain from the hook and just place a single crochet in. And then we are going to single crochet all the way along. At the end of the row you will have, if you're doing a stitch a week, you will have 21 stitches. For everybody else, you'll have a 1 stitch less than your chain number. Okay, so what you want to do whilst you're doing that is to remember to keep your work loose. Okay, there's no tight tension on this one, gang. If your tension is tight for row number 2, this is where you're going to have issues. Okay, so your best bet is to do a little mini sample first, like I'm doing, just to get your head into how your tension needs to be. Otherwise you may end up having to undo your book, frogging it back a bit, a couple of rows, and then working it back up, because you may find that if your tension's too tight, your work will go inwards a bit on one or both of the edges. Right, but let's get on with row number 2. Now for row number 2, we are going to chain 1 and we are going to turn our work. Now in every row from this point on, we are going to place a single crochet in the first spot. Okay, now I'm going to just sort my camera out, see if I can get a little bit lower for you guys so that you can see the exact placements. Right, so now let's get on with the waistcoat stitch. Crikey, what a mouthful. Right, so this is important as to where you're now placing your hook, okay, because this isn't a standard stitches we've done previously. This is a bit of a fiddly one. So if you look at the side top of your work, of course we have our V. And tilt your work so it's facing you, right side's facing you, and you'll see there's the first part of the V, and then there is this little hidden line here. Now what you want to do is you want to go under that, and you will see you've got a little upside down V just there. Can you make that out? Fingers crossed you can. Right, hopefully it's easier to see actually on the next stitch. There's the V there. Okay, so for this stitch we are going to place our hook in the middle of that V and push it all the way through. Now this is where it can be a little bit tight and a little bit awkward for this, especially for this first row. You're going to hook over, you're going to pull up your yarn. Now what you want to do is you want to pull up that loop that you've just pulled through so that it's the same height as the one on your hook. Then hook over and pull through to finish off your single crochet. Now that is how you're going to do it all the way along. Otherwise your tension's going to your stitch is going to be too tight and you won't be able to work into it for the next row and any future rows. Okay, so let me show you that again. Into the next stitch we are going underneath that little line that's running across, sticking our hook in the middle of those in that upside down V, hooking over, pulling up a loop, bringing it up to the same height as the one on our hook, and finishing off our single crochet. And we are going to do that all of the way along until you get to the last stitch, okay, until we get to here. So I'll work along with you now. In the V, stab it, pull up, hook over, pull through. Find the next stitch, the next line, the next V, and in we go. As I said, it can be a little bit awkward, so if you hear me huffing, puffing and straining, you know why. Into the next stitch, into that V. Oh. Make sure it's the same length. Again. And we're going to do this all the way along. Okay, so as you can see, I am keeping this, my tension on this, really loose, and I've run with a bigger size hook as well. Okay, now where are we? We have got 2 left to do, but we're only going to be doing one of them. Okay, so that is my stitch number 9. So pause the video now, and when you get to near the end of your row, meet me back here. Right, so now we are back at the end of the row. We have got one more stitch here. Now we will not be working into this stitch. I say it in big words, not working into it, gang. What we're going to be doing is a normal single crochet at the end of the row. Okay, and that is it. Now your stitch count should, of course, in my case it's 10, and if you're doing the stitch a week, your stitch count at this point should be 21. And for anybody else, it's one less than your chain. Right, so now we are going to work on to row number 3. Now this is our repeat row for every single row. Okay, so we are going to chain 1 and turn our work. You are going to place a standard single crochet in the first stitch, and then you're always on every single row going to work into this very first upside down V. Okay, so you're going to work into that, and then you're going to work into each upside down V all the way along your row. Making sure, of course, you pull that loop that you're pulling through all the way up. Now, if you are finding it hard to identify your stitches at each end, stitch markers are a godsend and a lifesaver. And yes, I did use stitch markers for this square here. Until I got about halfway up, and then it clicked, because I did end up frogging it out quite a bit. Alright, sorry, I'm talking, and let's get on with this. So, of course, we are placing our single crochets into that V-stitch all the way along. And then ignore that last upside down V-stitch, and this is where I cheated. I actually placed my hook through the side of my work to pull up the loop for my very last single crochet, because by doing it that way it meant there was no chance of it weaving inwards. Okay, now we chain 1 and we'll turn our work and we repeat. Okay, that is it. We just repeat the whole thing all the way along. So I'm going to timestamp here. I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to do again, and hopefully after a couple of watches you'll have sussed it out. Right, so let's pop this down. At the start of your work, you're chaining 1, of course, and turning. Then you're placing a single crochet into that very first spot. Then you start your single crochets with that into your very first V, and you upside down V, sorry. So a single crochet into here and into each stitch along until you get to that very last one, where we're going to ignore it and we're going to jump straight into the edge of our work and pop a standard single crochet in. Then of course you're going to chain, turn your work and start it all again. So fingers crossed you've got that and you understand it. Keeping everything crossed. Right, okay, so going back to our stitch a week gang, you're going to keep going backwards and forwards until you have a total of, oh crikey, I've got to try and count these now because I didn't keep count. Right, so for my stitch a week gang, I ended up doing 29 rows. Okay, to make sure that this was the same height and width. Now, what I do normally say is measure it up against week number 5, but I've realised that my lemon peel stitch from the other week is actually flatter and easier to lay my work onto to check my sizing. Now, of course, my tension's a little bit off. The top is a little bit, it's not as wide as the bottom, but otherwise, it'll do, gang, it'll do. So there you go. There is this week's Stitch a Week. I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial. I can't wait to see what choices of yarn you have used this week. So don't forget, once you're finished, send me that photo. If you can get it to me before 4 PM on Friday, and that's 4 PM GMT, then I'll be able to pop it into this week's Whips, Bits and Chat. But don't panic if you don't manage to make it by that time. There is no rush. I will happily put it in the week after, or the week after that. So If you need my email address, that is in the description box down below, as well as a link over to the Facebook group where you can post it up and I get to see it straight away. Right, I'm going to head off now. I will see you all really, really soon. So if you can, please stay in. Definitely stay safe. Ta-ra for now, everybody.